Hi all, welcome back to the By Sophia Claire podcast. I'm Sophia. This is a space where we are dedicated to embodied living. So I explore creativity, connection, and what it means to show up as your fullest self in every single season of your life. And today we're also bringing in the science and the data because I have a very special guest with me, Dr. Drew Edwards. He is a nationally recognized expert in behavioral medicine and addictive disease based in Jacksonville, Florida, and he's the founder of the Neurogenesis Project. Dr. Drew has been compiling research on depression, suicide, and mental health trends among young people in the United States. So we're talking about all those important topics, the data that you can use to support you in your knowledge with young people. Parents can use this information, and we'll give some, tips and advice on best practices for solutions and how we can, serve young people and help resolve these mental health issues. Because this is something we're very passionate about and we care about. So we want to be of service through this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me for this discussion, Dr. Drew.
My pleasure. Good to see you.
It's so good to see you and good to be with you. I want to jump right into the research that you shared with me, because you've been compiling research on, like I said, depression, suicide, and mental health trends among young people in the United States specifically. And one number that really stood out to me was that 40% of high school students reported persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness in 2023, which is recent data we can use to kind of estimate we're probably at a similar rate now in 2026. Can you tell us more about what the mental health data shows for young Americans in recent years, or what you think is most important for parents and for young people to know?
That's a great question. Thank you for having me. I started getting interested in this back in the 90s. I think Lincoln was president. Because I worked with young people. I started my career working with adolescent drug addicts, which is nobody in their right mind would want a career like that. But I loved it. And I saw suicidal kids, and these were suburban kids, mostly smoking weed. And one of the trends that I noticed, and I started keeping track of this, that about 85% of the kids who were admitted, their parents were recently divorced. And I just sort of kept that in my mind. And you never hear anyone talking about things like divorce as being a problem for a kid. The answer a young person gets is, well, everyone gets divorced. Half the people get divorced. Get over it. Well, they don't get over it. They turn it in. And those kind of things can lead to nothing in some kids. They can get through it, but some of them never really get over that. And that's just one example of the plethora of things that are really getting after our kids and making life so miserable for them that 14 years old, they can't find a reason to live sometimes. So the data that's been standard is about 1 in 5 high school kids in high school say they have seriously considered or attempted suicide, 20%. And you think about high school, you thought about 1 in 5 of my classmates were that depressed. So it's pretty amazing, and that trend has stayed. The suicide rate bumped up, actually went down during COVID. Depression went up, suicide rate went down for just a couple points. But it's tripled 3 times since about 2007 among young people. And so we think, why?
Yeah, that's good to know. And the points that you bring up about kind of generalized statements, like everyone goes through these sorts of things, and divorce happens. It's not super helpful when people say that to teenagers, because everything is personal. Everyone responds differently to these sorts of traumas and paradigms, and if it's a divorce, it's like the family is breaking apart, the family is changing, the family is separating. Teenagers and adolescents are already going through so much change, so much biological change. All their hormones are changing, and it's like, suicide, self-harm, that's not the solution, but they're searching for a solution. Yeah.
One of the things our audience should know that, and talk about back to neuroscience, the human brain doesn't get fully baked. It isn't fully developed in men until they're about 30, and women about 26. And that's an average, but it's held that way. And it starts from the back, the cerebellum. That's our coordination, walking, breathing, heart rate, autonomic nervous system. You don't have to think about that. To the frontal cortex, where we say, boy, I really want to do this, but we have this inhibitory maturity that says, no, that's against my values, I shouldn't do that, it would be cheating, I'd be lying. That's that part of the frontal brain, and that's the last thing to develop.
Totally.
So you think about, well, what are parents for? They're the external cortex. They're the external frontal cortex to say, no, don't run in the street. And they don't do that. And you think about this, a parent's number one job is to protect their children, particularly a father. Number one job is to protect their children. When they run on the street, you discipline them because you talk to them, you do it, but eventually you have to say, yeah, it might hurt if I swat you on the butt, but I don't want to see you get run over by a car. And you can't explain it to them in 3.
Yeah.
They just have to know to obey their parents. You don't see kids obeying their parents very much anymore. Been to the grocery store lately?
I'm really glad you bring that up, though. I'm glad you emphasize that. I think it's important to emphasize the prefrontal cortex and the years that's fully matured, because I bring that up in conversation with friends as often as I can. I'm like, you're 26, you're 27, as a woman, your brain is now like fully formed. Your personality is maybe pretty set. You have a good sense of self. Men, when you're 30, and I'm so grateful I met my husband when he was 30. I was like, you're a man, you know?
He's a man.
But I want to remind teenagers that and emphasize that, because I know that the teen years and the adolescent years, they feel so important. You're making all these decisions, you're figuring out who you are, but it's not the be all end all. It's not, it's not set in stone. You're going to keep evolving and maturing. And so if you feel like you're going through a hard time, like, know that can pass, and you're still shaping yourself, and seek encouragement and ask for help from friends and family and people that you trust, and know that your brain is still, you're still figuring things out. Like, you don't have to have everything perfect.
Yes, that's a great point.
Yeah.
You know, the brain is like, we have our brain stem, our spinal cord, and this is where our limbic system is, our emotional, or as Freud would say, our id. I want to eat, I want to hydrate, I want to make babies, because that's how the species will survive.
The old brain,
Yeah, they call them. And then humans have this huge prefrontal cortex, and the monkeys don't have any of that. You know, it's raining, sleeting out, they never think to build anything. They just sit around and freeze. They're not even close to what we can do.
Yeah.
And so we figured out how to protect ourselves and to survive. And children don't have that, and they'll never have that until they mature. And that's why families are so important. We also live in a culture that's downplaying the role of a family, and particularly the father. When the father goes, you know that the new study has come out and said it's worse for the kid to grow up without their dad than without their mom. No, that's counterintuitive to everything we've been taught. At a certain age, it is. But something about dads, everyone's different, as you said. You can't generalize to everybody, but that surprised me.
Yeah, that's surprising. I'll have to include that data point in our synopsis.
And I'll find you the piece on that.
Thank you. But it is, interesting and distinct, and I agree with you, especially about, I love what you shared, the data in the article that you wrote about being wired for connection, because we really are. And I think part of the solution to these problems that we can emphasize is, again, for young people to be aware that you can ask for help, you can seek community. I encourage you to ask your parents for help if you're feeling isolated, alone, lost, confused, or like, I remember being a teenager and feeling so much internal pressure. Again, like I had to have things perfect, figured out. Like I was wrestling with my mind and my angels, and I was like, why am I going through such a hard time,
Yes.
But it's like, ease off the pressure a little bit and give yourself some grace, and realize this is a season of life, and it is good to know how your brain works, like Dr. Drew has emphasized, because we are humans, we are wired for socialization and connection. Human relationships are so important. So maybe you need to ask for a hug, maybe you need to have a conversation with a friend. You definitely need to seek that connection. And so third spaces like churches, communities, sports, coffee shops, things like that are also so important to make sure that you're not being further isolated in this sense of aloneness, because the truth is you're not alone. Like any of these difficult things that you may be going through, whether it's suicidal ideation or depression or divorce or self-harm or eating disorders, you know, everything under the sun, other humans have experienced and can relate to you and can help you through it. So seek that community. And when I look at the data, and what we're talking about is kind of leading me to what keeps coming up is this sense of disconnection, because there's social media, there's all these different paradigms where people think we're connected, they feel connected, maybe they're seeing their peers online and it feels like, oh, I know what's going on with them, but that's not the same thing as true connection.
Absolutely.
And this sense of disconnection is kind of pervasive from yourself. Are you disconnected from yourself and your sense of self, or from your community? Like, do you feel that you're involved in your community? Can you find a way to like get involved and step in and be of service? Because that often readjusts your perspective and really helps.
It really does.
Yeah.
I heard this a long time ago, the dark time. I might have been in high school or a little older, but someone said the opposite of loneliness is giving.
Giving, I love that.
That really hit me.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, because you can't be lonely when you're giving, you're helping somebody.
Definitely.
The other point that you're making, and I want to give you a word, it's called sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
I told my children, no matter what happens in the world, this home will be a sanctuary. When the world kicks you around and bullies you and teases you, you'll be safe here.
Thanks.
So everyone doesn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
But the word we want is where do you find sanctuary? It could be, as you said, you gave a lot of examples, but sometimes it's just one person,
Mm-hmm.
a great friend who will not judge you.
Yeah.
If you have that, and the data will point that out, if you have one person you believe cares whether you live or die and will be there for you, the rates plummet.
Yeah.
And so we all need that person,
Yes.
best friend, or whatever we call it, bestie or
Yes.
something these days. I don't know what it's called.
No, that's
But
important.
think about your best friends and when you needed them, you know,
Mhm.
that was better than anything.
Yes, a best friend, a mentor, a coach, a teacher.
Mhm.
Find someone. There are people, everyone, you know, someone cares about you, someone loves you.
Yep.
And sometimes it comes down to asking. Like, one of my favorite Bible verses is the ask and you will receive. Like, it's important to remember to ask, speak up when you need help. And so I'm glad that we're emphasizing this connection, how you solve the problem of disconnection from self or from your community, and a sense of belonging. You can find it by searching outwards from yourself, by being of service, by reaching out. And I'm sure other solutions will come up through discussion, but from your clinical and neuroscience perspective, what role does genuine human connection play in the young person's mental health and supporting them? And what happens neurologically when a young person feels like they really belong somewhere versus not belonging?
The second part is the easiest part. When a kid believes they have a sanctuary, they have people who love them and they can get home and someone will listen to them. I love it when, as parents, we all do this. We say, "You can tell me anything, you know. How was your day?" "Well, I did this, and Johnny did this, and I did." "Well, you needed to do it," and then the kid's done talking to you. If you start the sentence with "you need to," the kids realize you're not interested in listening to me, you know, because we want to correct them all the time. I think it's particularly difficult for young women.
Okay.
Young women have this, in our hyper-sexualized culture, what are women comparing themselves to? To be hot.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Perfect.
in a culture that the first word you use to judge somebody is whether they're hot or not, and that is so bad. That is so wrong.
Yeah.
But women internalize this and they compare themselves to unreal things, and everyone wants. And my daughters have told me that in middle school was a competition to who had a boyfriend, and the competition was, well, you don't have a boyfriend by 8th grade, something must be wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's wrong with you. You're not ready to have a boyfriend in 8th grade, and your parents shouldn't let you.
No, you're growing. You're a kid.
And nothing good's going to happen there eventually. But what's happening is we all want that intimacy.
Yeah.
But the frontal brain doesn't know what intimacy, real intimacy. It only knows what the carnal brain, the hedonic brain knows, which is physicalness. and that kids slip into that, and he'll like me then, or she'll like me then, and that creates a whole set of problems, and then it snowballs. Or some young people, guys too, and just so our audience knows, the disparity in suicides, men die more from attempted suicides because they use more lethal means. Twice as many women attempt suicide than men.
Wow.
But they do it usually pills and things, and if we can get you to the hospital with a heartbeat, we can save you. If you blow your head off, you can't, and that's what guys often do, or get in cars and drive 1,000 miles an hour, and because guys are, when teenage boys act angry, they're hurt, they're sad, they're not angry. Someone hurt their feelings, but they never say that. You can't say to your friends, someone hurt my feelings. So they act mad. And girls tend to take their anger and internalize it as sadness oftentimes. So you gotta have someone to talk to about some of these things.
It's so interesting. It's how different that divergence in terms of how men and women tend to be socialized.
Yes.
And I think luckily that's changing a bit with like people having more language, therapy language, neuroscience language and understanding. But I think it's also important to emphasize, again, having that person that you connect, that you trust with, having an outlet, a sport, a creative outlet, journaling. I always loved that when I was really going through the depths of the hard times as a young person, and having those outlets so that you're not turning to destructive ways like you've talked about, or seeking just attention from men or something. Like, it's interesting, I feel like earlier with finding a community, I talked about turning outwards, but some of this also, it's about turning inwards and reflecting on what you really need. What does your heart need? What needs to be heard? What do you need to maybe write down or speak about? What do you need to process? What feelings do you really need to process so that you are feeling cared for and safe in your body? And I think it's important too to point out that neurologically, and you could speak to this a bit, when a young person feels like they belong in a community, when they feel safe, this sense of safety opens up in the mind, right? There's more space for possibility. There's a sense of hopefulness. And so how do we cultivate that like sense of safety, encourage young people to, that's what they should be looking for, not the external validation and things like that?
Yes, and I think that starts in the family with parents spending time with their children at a very early age and setting this standard that I will be there, and you can count on that. The whole idea of attachment has been talked about a lot lately. And I've had several patients that are on, they're teenagers, and they were adopted, or their mother was a drug addict, and they didn't get nurtured until they were over 2.
Oh.
It's too late then. The attachment disorder, you must bond. That's that oxytocin and the bonding. Children who don't do that, they don't turn out well. We need to know, and the one thing that Eric Erickson, his steps of development, and talked about that stage 1, trust versus mistrust. But that child doesn't learn in the first 2 years that he can trust his caregivers and the world. He goes through the world anxious and suspicious, and often acts out, and men or women. And so it starts really early with having a child, and that teaching that child that every time they cry, they're not going to cry for hours, they're going to cry for 5 minutes, and someone will come and help me. We're the only species that needs parents as long as we do.
Yeah, we're big babies.
Yeah, we are, exactly.
But like you said, this too shall pass, and I think that's why I love to emphasize the tools that have helped me so much in my, as I've matured and learned to embody more of a sense of confidence and assuredness, and let go of those emotions that don't really serve me anymore, heal past traumas and whatnot. So I love to, like we said, write, speak, share, create, use emotional freedom technique, and I've also had a great experience with neurofeedback. So I'm glad that there's these treatments out there for people to receive that care and help rewire their brain for feeling safe. Right?
All that is so good, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but our nutrition and the poor quality of our food and our water, and there's some very quick supplemental fixes, things as simple as B12 and it's amazing how much that will fix somebody.
Yeah.
But we don't think like that. We think everything we eat probably is okay. You know, it's really not. So a lot of in our practice, we start with the basics. You know, foundational. How are you built? What have you been putting in there? Where's your energy? Where do you get your energy? Where's your happiest spot? You know, and you're right to think about. Kids will, they go in phases. Something will happen. Episodic depression. Somebody is mean to them, bullies them. The boyfriend breaks up with them, and they want to die. Like again, and they have to know that in 2 weeks this will be better, but they don't. They don't know that. Mm-hmm. They don't think it's ever going to change.
They have to be told it. Okay, emphasize, re-emphasize, say it again. We're saying it to you guys now.
A friend saying, "I'll be here for you."
Yes.
You know, that makes all the difference in the world.
That's awesome, and I love what you said too about foundational health. I love that you guys do that in your practice, and maybe this would be a good way to ask you this next question. If you have a specific client that you guys have helped, maybe a woman, a young girl who was dealing with suicidal ideation, if you have any examples of that nutrition and that treatment really like helping her turn a corner. So
Sure.
Some of the data that you shared with me shows that the female suicide attempts in the US rose from 8 to 11% between 2009 and 2019, with no equivalent rise in males. And you know, is there something showing why that rise was driven specifically for young women, and how we can treat it and fix it?
I think it's probably women are having access to more lethal means. It's probably what that is.
Interesting.
My guess. There isn't a good. I can't give you a true answer because I haven't seen it.
Data's forthcoming.
Yeah.
But it's good to know the rate.
But it's not getting better, and we're becoming less connected in meaningful ways. The internet is a blessing in one way if you really want to use it for academic reasons, not AI, but it's turned into a place. If I have weird feelings about myself, if I think I'm whatever, I can find a group somewhere in the world who tell me I'm okay, everyone else is bad.
Yeah.
And so they glom on to people who agree with whatever pathology they're living, and that just gets worse. And you see that, and time on the internet, particularly on things like Instagram with women, is correlated with suicide. You know, anything where they're comparing themselves to other women and their relationships. So it is not a healthy thing, and parents need to monitor it.
Monitor the time that your kid or adolescent or teenager is spending on socials. I definitely think that's important. What would you recommend because I understand, and when I have kids, I want them to have access to a phone by a certain age in case they need to get in touch with me, but I think it's important to have like guardrails and agreements, you know? So what would you think is the best case agreement to make with teenagers about that? Like, because they can see the correlation between that and their mental health if you explain it to them well.
Yeah, my daughter's kids have not been on the internet. She's 9 now, 10.
Nice.
She's not been on it, and she won't let her. And she just knows she's my daughter. She grew up with it. Dad was very paranoid, you know, about protecting them, but she does it very well, and they're happiest kids ever, you know, and so she's done it right. You asked about cases. That family brought their 15-year-old son in. He was really bright, but he'd been smoking weed, really bad. And there's some family drama, and he was depressed, and you know, I don't want to live. And we examined him. We had some blood work, and we infused him with particularly vitamin B12 and some other just basic supplements. In 15 minutes on the way home, they called, and he says, "It's gone."
Wow.
It's gone.
He was relieved.
So he wasn't, you know, we had to do him a bunch of more times, but he was so depleted.
Wow.
And he was smoking weed to feel normal, so he could just function.
To regulate, but it doesn't help. It's not really a true solution.
It makes you worse.
Yeah.
It makes you worse. Weed is one of the most damaging things you can do to your brain.
Wow.
That nitrous oxide. Really bad for your brain. But we ended up doing several treatments with him, and last I heard, he got a degree in engineering from, I think, some big grade school somewhere.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just nutrients and getting a family who cares. And he didn't know why he felt so bad. But we don't, when we feel bad, we want to point to something. It's because of that, or you did that to me. It's just biology sometimes.
Yeah.
And you can't control it. And that's sometimes the message we got to sit down with our friends or our kids and say, it's biology.
Yeah.
You're not nuts. You're nothing wrong with you. Your biology is different. Let's get you fixed. Let's get you help.
That's so important.
So
yeah. There's so
no,
many factors.
Yeah. You know, we grow up with this body, mind, and spirit, but you never see them walking around without each other, right? So the mind, the brain is part of the body. What happens to the brain happens to the body, and vice versa. So we're trying to change the narrative. The brain is biology. The brain is part of our body. So brain addiction is actually brain failure. Depression is brain failure. You have heart failure, liver failure. Depression is brain failure.
Definitely.
So we can treat that.
That's awesome, and it's important. I love that you're normalizing it, destigmatizing it, because the brain is part of the whole system. So if you're going through mental struggles, you need help and treatment, just like any other medical crisis.
But we get all judgy when it's at the brain because we can't see it, right? Asking a kid who's depressed to go through school and participate in all this stuff is like asking someone with a broken leg to run the mile. You can't do it. You know, the expectation has got to be relevant. And now we use them. We actually show all our patients their MRIs in color.
Okay.
And we can show them, see this? That's not supposed to look like that. No, what's wrong with a normal one? And they realize, I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
Nothing, it's biology, you know?
Yeah.
And it's so relieved when they see that.
That's wonderful. I'm happy about that. Yeah, that relief and hopefulness that you're bringing to your patients. Thank you for doing that important work. So, to kind of wrap up our conversation with some solutions for young people and also the people who love them, the people who mentor them, the coaches, teachers, parents, what does a genuinely nourishing social life look like to a young person? If you want to speak to some examples, and what are the most important social skills that you think we should be teaching and modeling our young people?
You know, I learned that there was 4 stages of parenting. The first one is because I told you so.
Okay.
I said so. So when you're 3 years old, you don't have time. You're running in the street. You don't have time for an explanation. The kid needs to learn to obey the mom and dad because he can't understand. He's too little. The car can't see him. It'll kill him. He's got to obey. The second is the why. 8 or 9, the why, and you tell them the why because their brain can understand.
And they start wanting to know why.
And then if you do that right, then teenage years, you're kind of like they're in the game. You're a coach calling in plays, and they can run them or not, you know, or they can fake you out. But when they go away to high school, they're kind of on their own making decisions. You want to keep the connection with them, and then after that, you can be a trusted friend, like you and mom.
Yeah, my mom and I have a great relationship.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
And you're a good model for that. But everyone needs someone to be connected to, and so it's good to ask, who do you talk to when you really need to talk to someone? And we always ask that. And if they don't have anybody, then it's me. You know, our practice isn't 50 minutes and you're out the door. Sometimes it's 2 hours. Because everyone's got a story to tell. Every human being who's suffering has a story behind it. And if you'll take the time to say, I want to hear your story. Tell me everything. That is so empowering. That's how you spell love. T-I-M-E. Time. Time. Right?
Time, care, love.
Because they do need to tell you their story, know someone cares.
Yeah, people want to feel heard, understood. They want that feeling of connection. We're wired for it, like we've said.
You also tell them that they're important when you listen to them. So many young people don't feel they're important to anybody. You think of that. I do this thing when I talk to middle school. I ask women, how much would I have to pay you to go back in middle school? And there isn't enough. Because middle school girls are the meanest creatures that are. They get better.
It's
right?
a weird time. I agree.
And boys get over it faster, but it's something about girls, they don't as fast. But I'm teasing, but yeah.
It is a weird time.
Some of those wounds, though, they'll come up. You know, they're 20 years old, 30 years old. This girl in middle school did this to me, but that's their story. They need to hear it. They don't need anyone to go, oh, get over it.
No.
They need someone to listen to them.
Definitely. That's so important. I love that. So the social skills of asking, speaking, connecting with people, talking with a friend, a confidant, in a safe space, like you said.
You were the oldest, so did you notice that your friends who had older brothers and sisters seemed cooler because they had models?
Yeah, possibly.
And I was the oldest, and my
Okay.
friends all had older brothers and sisters, and they always had the cool words, you know. And I thought, and so parents have to understand how to teach their children how to socialize.
Mm-hmm.
And that starts with respecting adults. Don't interrupt an adult. That's my pet peeve, when a little kid comes up and interrupts adults all the time. You begin very early with teaching them what respect is and what honor is, and what how real men and real women should behave, and that has to be instilled when they're wee little lads and lassies, you know.
Yeah.
And but even when they get older, when they're in middle school, they don't know how to behave. They don't know what to say, and parents have got to sit down. It must be hard. You empathize with them. You see, it must be hard being in 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you can do that with your kid or your friend, you know, listening to people makes them feel important.
Yes.
And it makes all the difference in the world.
Yes, and I remember I had some great teachers. I learned a lot from teachers and church leaders when I was younger, because to be honest, like, I can think that maybe there was some movies and some TV shows where maybe I picked up some like social skills or social cues, but a lot of that media is not actually helpful, and some of it's like outlandish and ridiculous. So you want to be engaging with real people in real life and see how adults are speaking, not interrupting adults. I think some of the most important things that I heard as a kid was, you know, about like, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, listen more than you speak, that sort of thing. These little idioms and phrases and aphorisms, right? Is that what I'm saying? Truism. Like, those things are important to keep in mind. And I've learned so much from the examples of like teachers, again, and coaches and mentors and church leaders. So I'm really, really grateful for that. And I encourage people to seek that out, because those people that have those social skills of speaking and connecting and showing another person that you care, like, when you're in conversation with someone, you don't want to make it all about yourself. You want to ask them about themselves, and then you're really having a true conversation. You're really connecting.
Oh, you're so right.
Yeah.
Parents can teach their kids how to ask a question.
Yes.
And not seem like a nerd.
Yes.
You know? And because they don't know sometimes, particularly if they're not the oldest kid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's harder for the oldest to figure out how to fit in. And you mentioned church, and I didn't bring it, but I have this great slide that shows drug use, alcohol use, cigarette smoking, incarceration for high school kids, and versus church attenders who go either to youth group and Sunday 1 to 2 times a week versus non-attenders. And it's like they're twice as safe.
Wow.
Because of what you just said. They have a group, they have a positive role model.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go to a church that has a youth leader, no one comes, get a new youth leader, because that's the most valuable person in the church. Church should be fun for kids.
Yeah.
And I know yours, it was fun. And,
yeah.
So it's important that kids learn that they can be good and have a lot of fun doing it.
Mm-hmm. And I think luckily we are seeing, especially with like, you know, people being more aware of social media use and internet time and AI, there's this pivot. I think there's a swinging back into real life connections, relationship, community. And so hopefully we can continue to see that more, and more community being built for young people specifically, and where we can respond to mental health issues and people feel more of this sense of belonging. So
why do you think that's happening? I see that. Why do you think that's happening?
I think that people have been sick now for a while with like cancel culture stuff, online stuff, and the AI, you know, replicating people and making all this fake stuff. I think people are craving authenticity and real in-person connection, and I'm so grateful for my family instilling in me this belief that, you know, family and relationships are some of the most important things in our life. That's what really makes life so sweet and valuable. So I encourage people to pour into their relationships, because that is the resource that just keeps on giving, and it's like this positive cycle, you know.
Gratitude, you mentioned, is one of the things that's sort of the anti-depression.
Yes.
Gratitude, if you can find something to be you're grateful and happy for, and it may be the simplest thing, your dog, you know. I always tell, if you got an only child and the kids, give them a dog or a cat.
Yeah.
So here's an important distinction that this is how we found out how equine therapy works. You know, we get people who have been traumatized or depressed, and we get them with a horse. A horse is a big, scary animal. When they learn how to bond with a horse, they take some risks, they do some things, but we didn't know what happened in their brain. We didn't know. What happened is it isn't enough to know that someone loves you. You have to give love in a sacrificial way, or a way that's scary at first, but when you learn how to give love, you heal.
Sweet.
It's giving love that heals us.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
So yeah, so reciprocal relationships. I love that.
It kind of goes back to, if you don't feel lonely, give.
Yes.
You know? And so there's always someone who needs someone to listen to them. Anyone can do it.
Yes. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for taking the time for this conversation. This is so important. I think we've listed some wonderful solutions, like we said. If you feel lonely, give. Seek community, ask and receive. Gratitude, I love to encourage people, gratitude like first thing in the morning. It sets the tone for your whole day. I have a morning gratitude group chat, and sometimes it's the simplest thing of like, I'm grateful for the sunshine, I'm grateful for breakfast, you know, little things, and then people respond and they just share what they're grateful for, and it's like a really fun way to catch up and also just amplify the gratitude in your life. So I love that as another solution. And I'm so glad for everything we've shared and touched on. Before we wrap up, was there anything you wanted to ask me? Because I think there was maybe a few questions you had, or any like final messages you want to share.
One message is that depression is a biological disease, right? Meaning we can look at the brain now, and they're what's called biomarkers. We see some funky stuff with your body chemistry, right? And we've learned how to pinpoint some of this stuff. Unfortunately, if you have a managed care thing, they're not going to pay for any of this, right? They want to just throw a drug at you, but we don't do that. The other thing is, if you're feeling depressed or know someone who is depressed, talk to them. Tell them you'll listen to them. Or if it's you, find someone and say, you know, I've had some bad thoughts, and don't let them say to you, they're there now. Everyone has bad days. You know the difference between a bad day when you're a kid. And the one article, the book I wrote on depression in kids, starts with a story of a kid comes home and he's depressed, and he says, I had a bad day. He comes home 2 months later, says, did you have a bad day, honey? And he says, Mom, I'm having a bad life. And he tried to kill himself next week. And the school counselor blew the mom off and said, every kid has struggles in middle school. And the kid tried to kill himself. Luckily, he didn't. So, you know, if you're feeling sad and it's persisting, find someone to talk to. Okay, you must do that.
Definitely.
And it's okay to do it.
Yeah, if it's persisting for more than a couple days, if it's
The
weeks
dark
and
thoughts,
months, that's serious.
The darkest angels of our nature sometimes will rear their ugly heads and tell you you're worthless. I call it the committee in our head. You know, we have this committee that tells us you're great or you're worthless, and it's your committee. You have to kick them out. Right?
Yeah.
So, and for you, you answered one of my questions about, you know, the challenges in growing up, and some of the peers or friends that you had. Did you notice anything difference between the ones that turned out happy and healthy? I would put you in that group, versus the ones that kind of went to the dark side. Did you notice any difference?
That's an interesting question. I think that what you asked about having older siblings is interesting to reflect on, because yes, those family members or my friends who had siblings had an example, maybe a big brother protective figure. I remember at times being like, oh, that's nice, like I kind of want that. But then I learned how to be that myself for my family as the eldest daughter. And I do think that I was very lucky. My parents put me in a school that I loved, and I had church community and sports that I loved, where I found community and friends. And I think that the people I've known who struggle more have dealt with addiction, recovery now, and maybe just maybe like learning more later how to rely on faith or spirituality. You know, I kind of use those terms interchangeably. I guess I had good examples in my life. Like my mother brought me to yoga when I was a young kid, and I was like, I need to learn how to self-regulate a bit. So I've been on that path for a long time, and I'm grateful that that was instilled pretty young. And the
you have a great relationship with your mother too. I always noticed that.
Yeah, she's so sweet. Thank you. I'm so grateful for her. But I think that it really comes down to, for me, like being willing to be a lifelong learner, being willing to ask for advice and then actually take the advice or actually try implementing it. Because a lot of times we receive advice maybe and don't really apply it to our lives. And so those examples are important, and that's why we share. That's why I want to be an example to people. I want to help share this message of hopefulness. I'm available to help people and be a resource, and like I said, connect and serve how I can. So
you said something important. So sometimes you'll hear advice and you may not think it worked. What I've learned is there anything in that? Is there a nugget in that advice that applies to you that you could take and ponder for a while?
Totally.
Because sometimes we hear a talk and we go, but there's a part of it that resonates with it. So we don't have to judge it as horrible. We can say, no, I like this part.
Totally.
And sometimes that's all we need to do to start that brain of thinking positive and getting gratitude again. And that is a chemical process, by the way. But it's affected by the people we engage and the things that we do.
Yeah. Parsing through like what serves you, like you said, and what doesn't. Like you receive some advice, you read some things, and I liked being aware of that, being aware of what I consume as a young person, filter through that, process that, and then seek out and find the people who are supportive to you and who are feeding your soul and who are helping you, and then being aware of what you're consuming in terms of media and books as well. Like what actually lights you up? What are you passionate about? What gives you energy? What's not dragging you down? And having that awareness of those differences, and being aware of what you bring in and what you're bringing into your life and your world and your heart and your mind and all that. I think that's really important. So I've probably learned that through example.
Yoga is great, by the way.
Yeah.
Just because it's an activity you can go to, and yoga people all know each other. But whether it's yoga or just going to the gym, for young people, getting active is really good for your health. Exercise is one of and you can do all these supplements and GLP-1s. If you don't exercise, they're a waste of time. You have to exercise. We were made to farm and hunt and fish.
Move.
Yes.
And it's a relief to the brain, right? When you get the blood flowing, your oxygen flowing.
Yes.
I remember I loved learning that looking at like the blue sky and looking at the ocean like physically makes your mind happy. Like it gives you positive endorphins. So going outside, moving, those are foundational health practices to work.
Talk about that. Like looking at low level sunlight, when it goes down and when it goes up, does wonderful things for your mood. It's incredible. So.
Yeah, the brain is amazing like that. The whole brain body system. So I'm really glad we talked about that, because it's not just a mental thing. It's not, there's like physical body solutions, there's mental, there's digestive health, there's the foundational nutrition, and then there's also what you can do with your agency in terms of seeking out people and connections and socializing.
Absolutely. How'd you get so smart?
I'm passionate about all this stuff. How'd you get so smart? You're very smart. I appreciate you having this discussion with me, and I think it will serve a great audience, and I'm really excited to share it. So thank you so much, Dr. Drew.
Thank you.